If you want to understand power properly, sooner or later you end up having to talk about the state. The concept of the state aims to grasp how power gets concentrated in particular social and political institutions, as well as in the hands of a small number of people, and how particular power structures stay stable over time. The state is a central concept for understanding power, politics and society in disciplines like sociology and political science. Max Weber famously defined the state as a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. This definition of the state has two main advantages. First, it tells us very clearly what the state is and what it is not. Secondly, it has wide applicability to different states in history. While states can seem very solid and enduring, they have not always existed in human history. For about 90% of the time that humans have existed on the planet, they have lived in stateless societies. People were mostly hunters and gatherers who moved around the environment foraging for food in highly egalitarian societies. When Friedrich Engels reviewed anthropological studies of the Iroquois people in the late 19th century, he noted, "No soldiers, gendarmes and policemen, no nobility, kings, regents, prefects or judges, no prisons, no lawsuits, and still affairs run smoothly. There cannot be any poor and destitute. The communistic households and the gent lineage know their duties towards the aged, sick and disabled. All are free and equal, the women included." How then did states emerge? The state, as Engels noted, is a product of society at a certain stage of its development. It seems to have first emerged in a period from about 10,000 years ago, when people shifted from hunting and gathering to settled agriculture. These agrarian societies produced surpluses beyond people's immediate needs. The function of administering and allocating that surplus became separated from the work of production, and specialised groups of people came to perform these tasks. These people were then in a position to control others through their control of the surplus. The surplus made it possible for society to divide into classes, a class of direct producers and a class of people who direct production and manage its product. Not surprisingly, those who came to control the surplus were also in a position to appropriate part of it for themselves. The first evidence of a ruling class dates from about 6000 to 5000 BC in Egypt, Iran and China. This opened the way for a new kind of human history which would be based on states and class divisions. There have been many different types of states since then in many different parts of the world, including city-states, kingdoms and empires. The main elements of the modern Western conception of the state, however, gradually came together from about the late 13th century to the end of the 16th century. The important shift was from the idea of rulers being concerned with upholding their own position to the idea that there is a separate legal and constitutional order, that of the state, which the ruler has a duty to maintain. One effect of this transformation was that the power of the state, not that of the ruler, came to be regarded as the basis of government. This in turn enabled the state to be conceptualized in distinctively modern terms as the sole source of law and legitimate force within its own territory and as the sole appropriate object of its citizens' allegiances. The elements of this modern state were evident in England and France by about the 16th century. Since then, the major line of transformation has been the gradual democratization of the state. Countries like the United States of America moved entirely to a republican system of democratic government. But even where monarchies continue to exist, they are strongly constrained by the principles and institutions of parliamentary democracy. The Australian state is quite different from traditional monarchies, contemporary republics and totalitarian states, but it nonetheless shares with these states the core features that Weber identified. Modern democratic states usually comprise a set of social institutions through which they exercise political power over a territory and a population. These institutions can include the executive, such as the Prime Minister and Cabinet, the legislature or law-making body of Parliament, the bureaucracy or public service, the judiciary, the police and the military. The political power of the state can be exercised in a variety of ways. These include raising resources to fund its operations, defending its population and territory, determining the public good, making laws and policies, constructing and maintaining its legitimacy, suppressing internal opposition, governing the economic system, regulating trade and commerce, policing people's behaviour, administering justice, managing relationships with foreign states, and making war. However, the fact that the state comprises a number of different institutions means that it doesn't always act in a unified or coordinated way. Conflict can occur between different parts of the state, especially between the judiciary and the legislature. For example, in 1950, the Menzies Liberal government passed a law banning the Communist Party, but it was challenged in the High Court, where it was ruled in 1951 that the law was constitutionally invalid because it gave Parliament powers that the Constitution granted only to the courts. Similarly, in 2011, the High Court of Australia ruled that the Gillard government's Malaysian solution for asylum seekers was invalid, leaving the government's policy in tatters. The precise boundaries of the state may also be unclear or change over time. So it's possible to talk about the state being expanded or being rolled back. For example, governments may alter the number of ministerial portfolios and government departments they need, set up new intelligence and security agencies, set up new courts, as they did with the Family Court of Australia in 1976. They can abolish particular offices or advisory bodies to government, or set up new public authorities to regulate industrial, financial, or environmental activities. Many sociologists will also include publicly funded health, welfare and education services as part of the state, and perhaps also publicly owned or nationalised industries. The state, however, can't be properly understood without understanding the kinds of societies that have produced them and their relationships with other states in a globally connected world. In summary, I talked first about how the state is a central concept in sociology, which Weber defined as a human community that successfully claims a monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. Second, the state hasn't existed for most of human history and seems to have first developed when improvements in agricultural productivity enabled class division and control of economic surplus. Thirdly, modern democratic states usually exercise power through a series of component institutions, such as the executive, the legislature, and the public service. But these are not necessarily unified, and state frontiers can be expanded or they can be rolled back. The state, in any particular setting, can't be properly understood without understanding the kinds of societies that have produced them and their relationships with other states in a globally connected world.